I can feel very high.
In the last episode, the crew of the Enterprise were invited to visit a colony of some people called the Paragons. It went ever so slightly pear-shaped when their atmosphere ignited, and all of the nearly 4,000 colonists did a dead. Our shuttle was initially blamed and we were recalled to Earth. This was until the time pervert Daniels paid Archer a visit several months into the past, don't ask, and told him we were set up. A few shared secrets gave us the means to find, disable, and rob the buggers what done it. Said robbery resulted in data disks proving our innocence, much to the delight of all. Well, except the colonists, but they've got a pretty good excuse. Oh, and Mystery Time Lad wasn't chuffed either, as he's the one who told Sulibos to frame us. And that's why Sulibos chased us down and said he'd kaboom the ship if Archer didn't go with him. Archer agreed, only for the time pervert Daniels to take him nearly a millennium into the future instead. This turned out to be a shit plan, as the resulting timeline changes left them in a completely bollocksed up city with no tech to send Archer back. Let's rejoin them and see how they're going to deal with this one. Sulibos is a touch suspicious at being told Archer has simply disappeared, so T'Pol invites him to pop over himself and have a look around. It's not like Archer can slip out of the back door or anything. Sulibos agrees, and after T'Pol explains we don't have much of a choice, so do Reed and Tucker. Somewhere else entirely, and several hundred years into the future, Archer is chatting with the time pervert Daniels. The latter's still coming to terms with his whole life being ruined and or never existing, but Archer wants to do something productive, possibly because he's realized a ruined city won't have much food in it. A library might shed some light on this new version of history, and despite expecting everything to be electronic, we find this version of it uses paper. While they figure things out, Sulibos and his Cabal mates are taking back the data storage we nicked. They've also found a science wibbly in the elevator where Archer disappeared, and that's enough for Sulibos to conclude we weren't bullshitting after all. Still, no harm in making sure, so he locks everybody in their quarters and continues the search. Back on Earth, Detective Sykes from Alien Nation is telling Admiral Forrest Kelly that the Enterprise is overdue, and he's placing the blame firmly on Archer. I mean, okay, the Vulcan ship we were supposed to meet detected a few dozen vessels converging on the Enterprise, but that could mean anything. The Vulcan ship is on its way to intercept them and find out what the hell Archer's up to. As Sulibos gets back home and fails to receive a response when trying to call Mystery Time Lad for new orders, Archer is busy reading. Well, that's what he's up to in the future, obviously, but it's all the same. These history books have no record of an organization called the Federation, which the time pervert Daniels says is very wrong indeed. Archer coming here bollocksed up everything after it, which probably explains why Sulibos and Mystery Time Lad wanted him. Returning Archer is the obvious answer, but one made rather difficult by the distinct lack of time tech. We might not have that, but we do have Archer's phone and scanner. The time pervert Daniels thinks he might be able to rig this to send a message back, just like the one Sulibos receives, so they start working on a time phone. T'Pol's being interrogated. This apparently involves stripping her down to her shreddies and giving her drugs, which feels a bit on the nose for what we know about Hollywood these days, but let's ignore that for now. She shares that Archer believes he saw the time pervert Daniels a couple of days ago, but is personally of the opinion that time fuckery is impossible. The other crew aren't just waiting around to be rescued, at least. Tucker's managed to rig a makeshift phone network through the power system. It needs more work to reach other decks, but it's a start. And a start is what Archer and the time pervert Daniels have made too. They've managed to rig up a time phone that may possibly work, though getting it to target the right day is the kicker. Accidentally calling Alexander Graham Bell in the 19th century is probably just going to make things worse. The good news is they managed to reach the Enterprise at the right time. The bad news is they reached T'Pol's quarters and she's still off her nut on truth juice. A little chatting gets somewhere, fighting through both her confusion and her disbelief, and he passes on the basis of a plan. The plan involves reaching the old quarters of the time pervert Daniels, so we're all using the makeshift phone system to discuss it. Conduits are an option for getting around, but they're rather constrained. That means Hoshi is being volunteered, as we didn't bother expanding the phone system to members of the crew who don't appear on the DVD covers. This isn't great news for Hoshi due to suffering from a bit of the old claustrophobia, but as the alternative is not having a plan at all, she agrees. It looks like the plan is a little more complex than just getting to the quarters of the time pervert Daniels. A diversion to visit Phlox first provides some hypo sprays. We could probably ask why he's got meds in his quarters, but maybe it's just an emergency doctor's bag or something. A mishap when dropping from a ceiling conduit results in Hoshi losing her top, just in case you'd forgotten Rick Berman was overseeing the series. She gets to Reed's quarters and releases him, so she can get a new top and we can get on with the rest of the story. It would appear he's not the only one released, as T'Pol is found outside of her quarters by a pair of Cabal members. She was the bait apparently, as Reed and Tucker managed to disable them with the sprays Hoshi was given. Reed's on his own when he makes it to the quarters of the time pervert Daniels, though not alone for long. The room was being watched, you see, and he's immediately captured. His interrogation is a touch less subtle than T'Pol's, and a little percussive persuasion gets him talking. He was there to get one of the gizmos, he says. One Archer told him to destroy before he left, so Sulibos wouldn't find it and use it to make a phone call. Sulibos, who was unable to call Mystery Time Lad earlier, you'll remember, finds this data very interesting. A trip back to the timey-wimey room to see if Sulibos can use the gizmo to contact his boss is interrupted by a different call. While he was busy being distracted by Reed, T'Pol and Tucker recaptured engineering. According to the underling calling him, we've rigged the ship to kaboom and it's not something he can stop. Sulibos only cares about not putting the whole place in danger and carrying on with trying to place his phone call, so the underling has the Enterprise evacuated and towed to a safe distance. As Sulibos is just starting to receive a signal, the Enterprise decides it's not going to kaboom after all, and simply buggers off. This was part of the plan, a false overload so we could scarp her. It's worked, but we are now being pursued by a few dozen ships who are very pissed off at being tricked. Back to Sulibos we go, and he's almost got his phone working again thanks to the gizmo of the time pervert Daniels. His plea for some sort of response is rather more effective than he anticipates, as Archer appears in the flesh and knocks Sulibos on his arse. Mystery Time Lad might only be able to send phone calls, but the time pervert Daniels is rather more adept. Sulibos hasn't quite registered what's happening and thinks Archer being here means he's fulfilled the job Mystery Time Lad gave him. A bit of shouting from Archer brings him back to reality, and after grabbing the data storage again, we head for a ship to follow the Enterprise. This is very good news for the Enterprise, as they're currently getting pooped up good and proper. The attack abruptly stops and the ships peel away, with a single approaching ship giving us the reason why. Archer didn't escape on his own, you see, and presumably convinced Sulibos to call off the attack before knocking him out. We've rendezvoused with the Vulcan ship we were supposed to be meeting before going AWOL, and that means facing the music. Detective Sykes from Alien Nation now agrees we weren't responsible for the colony oopsie based on our evidence, but still thinks we're a bunch of irresponsible arseholes because of all the other dodgy shit we did. He plans to tell his Vulcan bosses we should cancel our mission, and Admiral Forrest Kelly's taking the idea seriously. Archer gives a speech that basically admits we are indeed a bunch of irresponsible dicks, but that we learn from it. Not particularly persuasive under the circumstances, so T'Pol joins in as well. The Vulcans went through similar growing pains in their own history, and it's not like they're saints today, what with placing spy stations under monasteries. Archer didn't cause that problem, she argues, but simply refused to be part of the one Vulcans had already made. Detective Sykes from Alien Nation was clearly not expecting this argument from one of his own people, and he makes no response as he and the rest of his entourage bugger off. Admiral Forrest Kelly says he'll call back when a decision has been reached. T'Pol's resting in her quarters when Archer comes to see her later. He's had word back from Admiral Forrest Kelly, and it looks like T'Pol's contribution in particular was persuasive. She claims to still not believe in time fuckery, so we'll leave her to consider if she's buying that any more than Archer is, as we get ready to take another step on the long road. It's Enterprise's second season, and that means dealing with the shitstorm we left Archer at the end of the last one. Situations with no possible way out are 10 a penny on Star Trek, of course, so it should come as no surprise that he found a solution. We could maybe have a discussion over that solution coming in the form of a MacGuffin, but this whole storyline's been riddled with future tech, so I'd argue it's valid. I think a far more reasonable question is why the time pervert Daniels left the majority of his equipment easily accessible in a locker when we learn during this episode that he had an alternative in the same room. During the story, we see Reed reaching into an extra special storage area for today's MacGuffin, kind of like a temporal bag of holding, if you will. We saw how far Reed needed to reach into the thing to find the MacGuffin, which implies there was plenty of space to stick all of the other gear in there too. I've previously supported the idea of having mates in the future who can give you the means to get out of a jam, and I stand by preferring the Doctor Who approach of just getting on with it, but I do think any solution provided should at least be consistent with established logic. Using this secure area for everything makes even more sense when you remember the time pervert Daniels shared these quarters with another member of the crew. Oh, and those stickers are back on the wall panels for those of you keeping track. Maybe they were storing them in the same place as the MacGuffin. There are a couple of other bits to point out while we're nitpicking. The plan to retake the ship has a logical flaw in it, for example. We previously saw Sulibos and his mates use drugs to elicit answers from T'Pol, yet the entire escape plan relied on Reed getting the shit beaten out of him instead. Had Sulibos followed the routine of using medication, one we'd literally just seen him do and was the only point of reference for the crew, the whole thing would have fallen apart. We could headcanon excuses for it, I suppose, such as not being familiar enough with human biology, but the real reason he doesn't is because the plot requires it. A somewhat less important complaint is that we can now use guns at warp speed, something Reed had said caused issues just a few episodes back. To be fair, he followed that comment up by saying he was working on it, so we can give this one the benefit of the doubt. Maybe them being unavailable when he needed them previously was enough impetus for Reed to focus on solving it. Last but not least, there's the needless sexualization of Hoshi for the lols. Enterprise has been weird about titillation since the very first episode, so it's not exactly a surprise, but it is still a disappointment. There's probably a conversation to be had about such elements being a cynical attempt to bring in a wider audience, and how that turned out when Enterprise was the first Trek show to be cancelled since TOS, but maybe that's a topic for the series summary. Instead, let's look at a positive. I'll give some points to whoever thought about the crew roster and placement of quarters, for example. Tucker and Reed, a commander and lieutenant respectively, are on B deck. Hoshi and Travis, both ensigns, are one level down on C deck. A little detail, I'll grant you, but a good catch and one worthy of praise. Similarly worthy of praise is that we get a few things to think about from today's episode. Let's start with the relationship between Sulibos and Mystery Time Lad. When Sulibos is unable to make contact, he becomes obsessed with rectifying this. Even a ship with an overloading warp core parked right next to him is delegated so he can keep trying to place a phone call. The obvious reason for this behaviour is the fear of reprisals. Sulibos himself is relieved when Archer appears despite being drop-kicked by him, saying there's no reason for punishment now. A prior failure resulted in having an upgrade removed, so his concern is clearly warranted. But it's also possibly driven by more than just fear. His behaviour in the timey-wimey room could be construed as supplication, pleading to the pedestal upon which Mystery Time Lad speaks to him. That might sound a little far-fetched on the surface, but look at the data. Mystery Time Lad possesses knowledge that basically qualifies as prescience from the viewpoint of Sulibos. He grants boons and punishes the unfaithful. He has a plan for his chosen in the Cabal. It's not such a leap to deity in the minds of those witnessing all this, especially on the part of the person through whom this power speaks. Sulibos has been the conduit of Mystery Time Lad's will, and it's a lot more appealing to be a believer than it is to be an underling. Perhaps it goes even further still. Maybe those upgrades are making more changes than the Cabal have been told. Maybe Mystery Time Lad had a chat with the founders and got a few pointers on how to genetically engineer subservience. Whatever the reason, the arrangement between them is clearly far from an equal one based on the behaviour of Sullibos in today's episode. This might also explain why some members of the Cabal turned against it and left. As we heard from Saren in the series premiere, the price of evolution was too high. While we're on the topic of Mystery Time Lad, we should probably give some thought to that lack of response. There are a few possible conclusions here. Option 1 is that this is intentional. Mystery Time Lad doesn't respond because he doesn't want to. Maybe that's because he doesn't currently have any useful instructions to provide at this particular point of temporal flux. Or maybe Sullibos became irrelevant when the time pervert Daniels nabbed Archer and did the job for him. If the purpose was to stop the formation of the Federation, then that goal was achieved when he jumped into the 31st century. Option 2 is potentially more interesting though. Maybe Mystery Time Lad doesn't respond because he can't. Removing Archer might have created sufficient waves that had arsed up the 31st century, but that change started at the point of Archer's removal. Mystery Time Lad in the 28th century is thus well within the blast zone, and may have been hit with the same unintended consequences that hit the time pervert Daniels. If so, that would suggest Mystery Time Lad is sufficiently connected to the results of current affairs as to be personally influenced by them, which in turn implies a certain level of proximity. A change may create waves, but getting splashed by them still requires you to be close enough. Option 2 is the more interesting in my opinion because it creates the most possibilities. Literally anybody we come into contact with, or anybody contacted by those we come into contact with, could be the cause. Maybe the Krenim that Voyager meets in the Delta Quadrant are responsible and simply want to remove Janeway as a variable in their own calculations. Maybe it's the last of the loyal Vorta from the Dominion, one who's been cloning themselves for centuries while perfecting time tech, desperately trying to prevent the defeat of the Founders hundreds of years ago. Maybe it's a descendant of Khan Noonien Singh who'd rather watch humanity burn than be denied their rightful throne. I've said it before and I'll say it again, an open question will always be preferable to an unsatisfying answer. We'll end this one with an incidental detail I noticed in the ruined library of the future. It's not particularly surprising that we're using real-world books to stock shelves here, as the sheer quantity would make fictional titles and authors prohibitive. But it does give us the likely unintentional situation of adding another science fiction universe that exists within Star Trek canon. This book just here, unless I'm very much mistaken, is a hardback copy of Chapter House Dune, the sixth and final Dune novel that Frank Herbert published before his death. The story of Arrakis is one that will live for at least 1,000 years, according to Star Trek, and may even be one that a few of the characters we know have read. I wonder if Archer thought of Paul Atreides and the Fremen last season when he visited a desert planet and met the native tribe fighting for freedom. End of episode.
Well, this is awkward.
Yeah, sorry and all that, only we thought you were the mastermind in charge of everything rather than just a dog. That's what we would have done, you see. No hard feelings. That's very decent of you.
Are we implying to the viewers that we understand him?
I think we'll just leave it nebulous for now and let them make up their own minds. YouTube, mate, don't worry about it.
Perhaps we should have a think about this season's overarching plot before we get lost in fourth wall nonsense.
Ain't discussing that just different fourth wall nonsense anyway?
Yes, but at least it's going in the right direction.
Fair point. Exactly.